Hello everyone and welcome to another devlog video for Homegrown, the casual farming game I'm making using my own engine. Long time no see. Sorry it's been a while since the last video, but progress on the game has actually been going really well. I've been doing a big reworking of the tool and item system in Homegrown, and I didn't film it as I was going along like I usually do because it was a lot of work in the code and not so much visual stuff. But before I move on to the next feature, I did just want to make this quick update video to show you all of the new changes and just update you on the current state of the game. So Homegrown has a very iterative game loop. You farm vegetables, which you sell for money, and then you use that money to upgrade your equipment, your tools, your compost, seeds, etc. And that allows you to farm more efficiently, which makes you more profit, and so on and so on. Recently, I've been concentrating on the upgrade part of the cycle, specifically upgrading your tools. Previously, the way this worked was really simple. There was just a selection of tools in the tool shop with various stats, with better tools obviously being more expensive. But I was thinking a lot about it recently, and I've now decided to go in a slightly different direction. So now, instead of always having to buy new tools, you can just upgrade your current tools. All of your tools have various stats, so for example this spade, you can see it has an area stat, a speed stat, and another stat to do with how much plant matter you get while using it, and you can now use your money to upgrade these stats. To do this, we need to go to the town area, where there's now this new building here, and this is where you'll upgrade and modify your tools. Just a quick reminder, I'm going to be redesigning all of the UI in the game fairly soon, so I haven't spent very long on the visuals of the interface here, and you can pretty much just think of this as a prototype for now, which I'm using to test the functionality. But let me show you around and demonstrate how it works. So at the top here, we've got an image of the tool, which in the future I'd like to turn into a rotating 3D model of the item. And I'm not sure what's going to go here yet, maybe some options to customize the tool somehow, change the color perhaps, but over here is where all of the main action happens. So all the current stats for the spade are listed here, and each stat has various tiers that you can upgrade to, and when you mouse over a tier, it shows what the stat would be at that tier. And if you want to upgrade to the next tier, you can just click the upgrade button on the right here, which will cost you some coins depending on the stat and the tier. So I'll upgrade the area stat for this spade until it's 4x3. And if I now go back to the farm, you can see that the spade can now dig a larger area than before. In essence, this new system hasn't really changed much because you're still spending coins to get better tools, but it does have a few benefits over the old system. Previously, when you always had to buy new tools to upgrade, you ended up with a lot of excess tools in your inventory, lots of old tools that you didn't need anymore, and they would just clutter up your inventory space. And sure, I could have made it possible to sell them back to the shop, but the upgrade system just avoids all of that entirely and saves you the hassle. The new system also allows for a bit more customizability, because you can choose exactly which stats you want to spend money on and basically customize the tool to your liking, rather than having to choose from a specific set of tools that I, as the developer, created for the game. And that's another little extra benefit for me. I now don't have to create hundreds of different tool items for the game. The upgrade system basically does that automatically. There is a bit of a downside though, which is that it currently feels a little bit underwhelming to upgrade your tools, because the only thing that changes at the moment is these numbers. Visually, the tool always looks the same as it did when you first got it, but that is something I'll be addressing when I do the UI overhaul. I'd like to try and implement the item icons in a kind of modular way, so different stats will change different aspects of the appearance of the tool somehow. I haven't completely worked out exactly how that's going to work yet, but the tool is definitely going to visually change when you upgrade it, which I think will feel a lot more satisfying. So that was the biggest change to the gameplay last month, but I actually spent the majority of my time working on something else, which was an overhaul of the item and tool system in code to make the system a lot more flexible than it previously was, because I'd started to realise that it was going to be a bit limiting in terms of what content I'd be able to have in the game. So most of the changes are code-based and haven't really changed much in the game at the moment, but I'll give you a quick overview of the biggest changes, and I'll try and explain how they're going to allow for a lot more content in the future. Firstly, there's a whole host of small changes to tool functionality, which I'll just go through quickly. So the area that the tool affects can now be non-square, so it can be any rectangular shape, which adds a bit more granularity to the upgrade system, because now the first upgrade no longer has to be from 1x1 to 2x2, which is quite a big jump, 4 times more squares. Now the first upgrade can go from 1x1 to 2x1, so smaller steps. If the area is not square, then you can rotate it by clicking the middle mouse button, and you can also reduce the size of the area. So for example, I've got a spade here that does an area of 5x5, but if I wanted to dig some smaller beds, then I can still do that with this spade. By holding shift and then using the mouse wheel, I can scale the area down to my liking. Next up, I always found working with multitile tools a little bit annoying because you had to be quite accurate with your mouse movements. For example, I should be able to water this whole area in 4 actions, but it's very easy to miss the area that you want to water because you have to get the cursor exactly into the middle tile of that section. So I fixed that, and now when the tool isn't active, you still have full movement, but when the tool is active, so when you're holding down the mouse button, it now locks to a grid that matches the size of your tool area, making it super easy to use. Tools that directly affect objects, like the harvesting tool or the fruit picker tool, have also had a couple of quality of life improvements. So firstly, the tool now snaps to any suitable objects, and if the tool area is smaller than the object size, then it temporarily expands to fit around the object, like this. Also, the entities now get highlighted to make it a bit clearer which entities the tool's going to affect. The way that you examine objects is also different now. Previously there was a button to go into examine mode, and then you could click on objects to examine them, but now it works by just hovering over an object when you have no items equipped. Currently the object's info shows up in the bottom right of the screen, but when I do the UI update, it's going to look something a little bit more like this, popping up above the relevant object, which I think will make a bit more sense. If you're in the middle of using a tool and you just want to quickly check the health of a plant without having to unequip your items, you can do that by just holding down Control, which temporarily puts you in examine mode, and when you release Control, you go back into tool mode, and you can see the cursor changes as well to show which mode you're in. And finally, I added an option to directly interact with the item that you're holding by pressing the E key. I haven't really made use of this yet, but as a very quick example, I made the fruit edible, so pressing E while holding fruit eats it, which doesn't do anything, it's just an example, but I have a few features in mind that will use item interaction in the future. Moving on to the more code-related changes now, I've changed the item system to use my old favourite, the component-based architecture. So previously items could only have a single function, which was rather limiting, but now they can be many things, and they can even be used as different tools in different situations. Again, not much actually makes use of this in the game yet, but I've made an example with the carrot item to give you an idea of how flexible this will make the items. So here are all the components that the carrot now has, and each of these gives it a certain functionality. So it's edible, I can eat it by pressing E. It counts as produce, so I can sell it at the grocery store. It's compostable, so it can be added to the compost heap, and just as a silly example, I also gave it the dibber component, so if I equip some seeds, I can actually use the carrot as part of the planting tool as a dibber, which allows you to plant multiple seeds at once. So hopefully that gets across the point that items can now be multifunctional and aren't just restricted to having a single purpose. Finally, one last code-based change is that objects in the world can now provide their own functionality. So what I mean by this, previously when you were using a tool, like the watering tool, it was the tool that provided all of the functionality for interacting. So in this case, the watering tool provided the code for watering tiles and also for refilling the watering can at the well. But now objects in the world can provide functionality, so the well itself has the functionality for refilling containers, and it accepts any item that can hold water. In this case it really doesn't make much of a difference, but there are a lot of objects that I'd like to add to the game in the future that will process items in some way, and I think that's going to benefit a lot from this change, and it's just going to make it much easier for me to work with. To show you what I mean, I've again made a very quick example. So here's a machine that melts down any plastic items that you give it. So I can put the watering can in and it gives me some melted plastic back, or I can put the chug basket in and it does the same. With the old system, I'd have had to add this plastic melting functionality to the watering tool, and not just the watering tool, but to all of the tools in the game that could potentially use a plastic item. But now I can just give that functionality to the plastic melter object, which obviously makes a lot more sense. I don't have to add the functionality to multiple tools, and it makes everything more scalable because I could implement this plastic melter object without having to edit any of the tools in the game, so it's much more self-contained. So that's pretty much everything I've been working on for the last month or so. I'll quickly show you the Trello page for the game now so you can see where we're currently at. So this is the overall roadmap, and I'm currently working on version 0.4, which is all about gameplay improvements. That's been including things like the lands buying feature and the different entity types that I showed you in the previous devlogs, as well as the changes to the tools and the items that I just showed you. Then coming up next, I've got some work to do on the plant health system. That should be quite a quick one. And then I've got some pretty big improvements coming to the compost system that I'm quite looking forward to. After that, there's just a few more gameplay improvements, and then I'll be done with version 0.4, and then I'll be moving on to that long-awaited UI overhaul, as well as the addition of sound and music into the game. Just a quick balcony update before I finish, because a few people have been asking how it's going, and annoyingly I missed showing you all of the planting because it's been so long since the last devlog video. But it's all going well. This is how it looks at the moment. I'll put the names of the vegetables on the screen so you can see what's what. I actually just had my first harvest of some radishes yesterday, which were very crisp and tasty. I had them in a salad along with some mint from the balcony as well. I've had a bit of trouble with the blueberry bush though. Half of it seems to have died, and my beetroot leaves are being attacked by some insect, but other than that, everything seems to be growing well. So that is going to be it for this video. If you have any suggestions about anything I've shown, then please do let me know, especially if it's about how to save my blueberry bush, but game suggestions are fine too, I guess. Before I finish, I want to give a big shout out to the top Patreon supporters from last month, who were Coda the Tyler, Ross from 2 Minute Tabletop, Nikat Asgazada, Zanil Ambakar, Atomic Code, Walden Yan, Chris Naismith, Josiah Hillman, Dieter Reinert, Harry Chung, John Needham, Christopher Poe, Adam Farkas, Hagen Vingard, Matthew Connaughton, Andrew Witt, Marek Mikolajczyk, Sean McCrory, Caffeine Coda, Timothy Gibbons, Alexander Chavez, and Neil Blakey Milner. So a massive thank you to you guys, and of course to everyone else supporting me over on Patreon. For this week though, that is it. Sorry again that it was so long since the last devlog video. I'll try and be a bit quicker with the next one. But thank you all very much for watching this video, and I'll see you all again next time.